Hello and welcome to the Musical Chairs Podcast, the only podcast that invites you to pull up a chair and take a listen. We are going to be celebrating a very special day in the world of music, and that day is Cassette Day. Never heard of it, have you? Neither did I until recently. You know how they have Record Store Day where, independent record salesmen go out there and they're like, we need you to buy this round thing full of vinyl with music on it and stick it to the big, large corporations that are putting vinyl and other formats out of business with digital downloads. Well, they decided to go ahead and do that with cassettes as well. Now, I'm 36 years old, and I remember cassettes. In fact, I was on the very, very last death throes of 8-track. So, I've lived with vinyl, I've lived with 8-track, I've lived with cassette, I've lived with CD, and now I'm living with digital downloads. So I just find it really interesting that, we went from getting one of these things and, progressing in sound quality and in the amount of music you can put on it and having all kinds of uses for it and portability and all that. And now we're going back to this. This is a record by Suicidal Tendencies there. And this was one of the first cassettes I ever purchased, and I bought it for one song.
I was in my room, and I was just staring at the wall, thinking about everything. Sitting down, I was thinking about nothing. And then my mom came in, and I didn't even know she was there. She called my name, and I didn't hear her. Then she started screaming, Mike, Mike! And I go, what? What's the matter? She goes, what's the matter with you? I go, there's nothing wrong, Mom. She goes, don't tell me that. You're on drugs. I go, no, Mom, I'm not on drugs. I'm okay. I'm just thinking, Why don't you give me a Pepsi? She goes, no, you're on drugs. I go, Mom, I'm okay. I'm just thinking. She goes, no, you're not thinking, you're on drugs. Normal people don't act that way. I go, Mom, just give me a Pepsi, please. All I want is a Pepsi. And she wouldn't give it to me. All I wanted was a Pepsi. Just one Pepsi. And she wouldn't give it to me. Just a Pepsi. Give my shirt with my sleeves. Just me back to CFC. Just yucky, just lazy. It's the good now, right? Oh, I'm not crazy. Here's the vision. You're the one that's crazy. Here's the vision. You got to be crazy. Here's the vision. Like they did in this.
And I want to talk about the virtues of the pros and cons of cassettes. The pro about cassettes is that it is portable. I mean, look how big this is. This is roughly 4 or 5 inches by maybe 3 inches. You stick this in your back pocket and sit on it and crack the case, like I've done millions of times. You can stick it in a car. You can stick it in a tape deck. It's relatively easy to use. And if you took care of them, they'd lasted a really long time. Con about using tapes is that they inevitably messed up somehow. You get some big pile of brown stuff stuck inside your wonderful tape deck that you'd have to fish out with, tweezers and with alcohol and light it on fire. And it was horrible. It was a horrible experience. Whenever these things messed up, they messed up well. A pro thing. These were great for, if you wanted to get into, splicing tape. This was awesome. I remember my dad buying splicing tape apparatus at the local Radio Shack, where you could sit there and you stretch your tape along the track and you cut it, and they had the special splicing tape, and they had grease, like a grease marker for you to do it. And that was really my introduction to analog recording, was using cassettes. In the 80s, you'd have your cassette, and it would mess up. You get a big pile, and then you would go and re-record it, and it would be like, you put it back together, and it'd be, karma, 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 don't you really wanna hurt me? That's what would happen when you splice it together. You just grab it, wherever it didn't mess up, and put it together and see what kind of mix you made. A con of these tapes was when you would put them in your tape deck in your car, and then you'd leave them there for days on end. And then the sound quality would completely die as a result of doing so. So sound quality on these things would suck as the more heat you applied to the tape medium. Now, I got into this really big discussion with my buddy of mine who was like, man, heat itself doesn't mess up the magnetic field on the tape. I know that. I know my science. I'm talking about the medium on which it was recorded. Trying to get all technical on me. Anyway, so that always sucked because it would be perfectly hissy and then it would get into it would turn into something like that halfway through. So nothing like listening to the Beastie Boys back in the day with my cassette player and being like, now here's a little story I got to tell about three bad brothers. You know, so well, started way back in history when I run into I'm thinking Mike D. Yeah, that's literally how it sounded whenever you had in the tape deck. Pro was that you could actually still get artwork with the tape, and you could get the lyrics here. So, for example, Institutionalized by said band, here is the chorus. They stuck me in an institution, said it was the only solution, to give me the need for professional help, to protect me from the enemy, myself. And that was pretty cool, man. You couldn't do this with LPs very easily. You couldn't have them in the car, so, you know, if your friend was driving, or if you were driving, you could sing along with your favorite songs. But because of the size of the tape, sometimes you couldn't read the lyrics. The lyrics would be too small. You had to pull out your magnifying glass and, you know, try to look up what the lyrics are. So that was always a bummer. And sometimes you wouldn't even get the correct album work. They would have different album work depending on what medium you bought. So you'd have to buy the record anyway at some point. Another pro was dubbing, where you could steal music. You could dub tapes from your buddy. Go ahead and put together get entire albums that way. You can trade them that way. I believe a lot of the major label artists that have been fighting, they've been fighting Napster and fighting, you know, all that stuff from the early 2000s, and hate Spotify and hate all these other items that are doing it. It's like they were tape traders back in the day. Just because it was crappy sound quality, nobody had really, it wasn't crappy, it was actually pretty good. But a lot of dubbing machines were really good. You know, even consumer level stuff was pretty good. But just because it was crappier quality, it wasn't an exact copy, it made it okay somewhat. And then, you know, when digital came out and it was exact copies, that's when everybody had a problem. So, you know, you could put together like cool ass mixtapes, which you can't really do anymore. People are trying. It's not the same. So you'd be out with a girl or wanting to be out with a girl, and you don't want to give her a mixtape because you put all your jams on there that remind you of her and say something about your relationship. So, you know, you would have something like, you know, the Rough Riders theme, showing that you're hardcore. Stop, drop, you know, you get that going. And then right next, the next song would be something like, I want your sex, dun, 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 I want your love. Yeah, you'd have that next to it. And then the next song would be something like, you know, I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more. And you would have that next to it. And it was cool because you were kind of captured audience whenever you actually listened to the tape, because you couldn't like fast forward through it to find the next gap. And I think that made it much more interesting to have a mixtape. Mix CDs, you can skip songs. You know, you can, mix playlist, you can skip songs. Mixtape, you kind of had to suffer a little bit for your art. And if you spent, you know, $9, $10 on this, you know, inflated numbers is probably closer to $18, $19 now. You were going to suffer for that tape. You were going to make sure you liked it because it was an investment as far as you were concerned. So you got to know your music a little bit more intimately as a result of having a cassette than you did having even a record sometimes, because at least this was portable and records weren't. And records you could, in theory, skip because they did have the little lines around to note where the new song started. You can't do that with CDs or tapes. Or, sorry, with CDs and digital downloads. So I think that's one of the good things about this. Bad thing about tapes, they sound like crap for the most part. Yeah, that's why I dealt with these, because they sounded okay. But I would take a CD over this any day. I really would. They're just the sonic capabilities of a cassette. It's not nearly the same as a CD. So I would really recommend that everybody rethink this cassette day thing, because I don't think that it's going to catch on the record store day. You know, I don't think so. I think tape decks kind of deserve a cruel death, except in studios and in niche markets. And I don't think it should ever make a recurrence. I really don't. So that's all I've got for today's podcast. Give me your thoughts. What are your favorite tape memories? Do you have a memory of having cassettes that you adored or that you love to play or that you still play today? Maybe you still got a tape deck in your car and you're like, hey, I'm gonna bump myself to brand new, I don't know, Oingo Boingo record. I don't know. So let me know. What do you think? And please help this podcast grow a bit. Tell your friends about it if you like some of this. Tell your enemy if you didn't. And subscribe to the channel. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and online. Anyway, I'm your host, Nelson Velasquez, and thank you for watching.